Steve Goldstein is the brilliant play-by-play man for the Florida Panthers on Bally Sports Florida, and he and Moeller gave us great local post-game shows during the playoffs and the Stanley Cup Final on Bally's. We had Moeller on yesterday, and I said I think I will always vividly remember you guys coming on the air after the six periods of hockey, almost 7 periods of hockey in Carolina, and beginning a post-game show when everyone was probably sleeping in South Florida. Goldie will be getting ready to call Dolphins preseason games on CBS4. The man never stops. He is joining us now. Hello, Goldie.
Did you know Kader Kohu changed his number to 4? Did you know that?
I did not know that. That is a nugget that you can only get with a guy like Goldie. Drop another gem on us.
Hawk, these number changes in the NFL are going to kill me in August. Like, Braxton Berrios is the first guy ever to wear a 0. Did you know that in the NFL?
I did not know that, and I didn't.
That's the 2 nuggets.
I thought that obviously 0 wasn't allowed because someone would have worn it by now. So that's a rule change for this season?
Yeah. So Braxton Berrios 0. 2 is going to wear a 1. You knew that.
Had that one.
Bradley Chubb is 2. I mean, it's going to be hard to, get all these guys down, man.
Today is 87 days till the Dolphins season opener. Would you like to know every player who's worn number 87?
Besides you, teal green? No, that's it. I'll just go with that.
You know who wears it this year? You know who wears number 87 this year for the Dolphins?
Is Desmond Daywood 83 or 87? One of those guys, they got a couple of new receivers, guys hard-pressed, obviously, to make the team. Freddie Swain, the former Gator, is 88. I think Daywood is probably 83, so it's escaping me at the moment who's 87.
It says Daywood Davis is 87. You were very close.
Okay, Daywood is 87, and I forget who's 83. Okay, yeah, a couple of those undrafted guys. That's who's got that very 83, close. 87, and yeah. I'll know it by August 11th. I'll tell you that, Hawk.
What's that?
I'll know it by August 11th against the Falcons. So
is that preseason game number 1?
You should know that. Come on, man. How do you not know that already?
My head is swimming after the last 2 months. I don't have to tell you. I mean, we argued today in the first segment as to whether French onion soup is really soup or if it's just grilled cheese in a bowl. And then Solana learned in the first segment today that there's such thing as an open-faced sandwich. He still doesn't believe it. You can attest to the fact delis all over the world have open-faced sandwiches.
The open-faced roast beef was a staple back at the Arch Diner in Brooklyn, in Canarsie. I used to go there all the time and have it. Sure, with the mashed potatoes. Yeah.
Right. I don't know. Solana's still looking confused by this. Like, will you take Goldie's word for it that it's not an uncommon menu item, the open-faced sandwich?
Goldie, I just can't wrap my head around the idea of somebody ordering an open-faced sandwich. I've heard of people ordering a sandwich and they take off one of the breads or both breads.
Well, they do it for you. That's the point of the sandwich. They do it for you. They take the bread off for you.
But is there any difference between me ordering, avocado toast and an open-faced sandwich? I mean, it's the same thing. It's just a piece of bread with something on top.
Right. No, that would be equal. Yes, that's correct. But the roast beef sandwich had all the gravy and stuff on it. So if you order it as a regular sandwich, and then you try to take the bread off yourself, you got to take the bread off is the point. But avocado on toast is like an open-faced sandwich. That's accurate. I'll give you that.
But I here was my argument is that for anything to be considered an open-faced sandwich, it has to originally be a sandwich. And nobody has an avocado sandwich.
That, you know what? I don't mean to be Switzerland here, but that is a great point by you, Hockman. So actually, I disagree with Solana. I didn't think of that.
You're being very open-faced yourself here, Goldie.
Sandwich. It has to be an original sandwich.
Right.
You take the top bread off, it becomes open-faced. 100%.
Exactly. Thank you. I'm glad we've covered this topic.
Right.
I'm glad Crowder wasn't. I'm sorry Crowder wasn't around to hear the resolution of this. Panthers held their exit interviews today. We found out they were even more banged up than we already knew. What does it say? I think it says something about the fortitude of this Panthers team that Matthew Tkachuk is trying to play through a broken sternum. Etu Luostarinen is trying to play on a broken leg. Aaron Ekblad is going to miss the next 6 years rehabbing from his injuries. Like, it says something about the fortitude of this Panthers team.
No, it does, and they were preaching all year how hard it is to do it, to win the whole thing. And these guys paid the price to do it literally with their bodies. And I give every one of them a ton of credit. Barkov is always banged up all year, never says a word. Obviously, we find out Ekblad had multiple injuries and he kept gutting it out. He's been with the team for 9 years. He wasn't going to miss this opportunity. So everything we thought all playoffs long the last 2 months, it's just like it's like putting the bread back on top of the sandwich. It's another layer of you just believing in the character and the heart and everything else of this team.
What can we say about year one of the Paul Maurice regime?
Wild, rocky, all over the place, from the outside, from inside, as stable as you can be. This guy from day one never, ever wavered. I mean, he never wavered. I remember early in the year they were losing games and they were playing well for parts of games. You remember that? And he'd do the post games. I really liked our first 40 minutes, and people would be like, what is he talking about? You're under 500. And it just had to get to that consistent level. And as I've told you during the year, Hoch, he would have his line mainly off the air, but I think he said it once in a while on the air. What's the point of making the playoffs if you don't have a game you can win with once you get there? And he stuck to that, and he stuck to it. And this team just developed. And that's what you want out of a team. You want to hit your peak when, the money time comes. And this team, they waited to the last possible second to hit their peak, game 74, and they hit their peak in the playoffs. That's for sure.
Yeah, we talked about it yesterday because I crushed him. I don't usually crush coaches. I've never been that kind of radio host. And I was just at my wit's end when they went on that 4-game losing streak. After they'd gone on a little winning streak, they went on that 4-game losing streak, and it looked like the playoffs were going to be out of question. And I had reached my boiling point. I came on, it was a Monday, and I just torched them. I'm like, this was a huge mistake by Bill Zito, and everything that they thought that they were doing to improve the team has not worked. And man, did I have to eat crow several times leading up to the postseason, during the postseason. And then yesterday on the show, I watched Paul Maurice. Now, I loved his post-game interviews and press conferences during the postseason. He had an interview with Jackie Redmond on TNT in the tunnel after they had been bounced. And I have to tell you, it just spoke to me in a way that many coaches don't break through, especially in a situation like that. So I was way off on Paul Maurice, and I imagine a lot of fans in South Florida were.
Yeah, I think so. Look, and you had you had reason. I mean, you go from 122 points, the best offense in a quarter century, to looking like you're not going to make the playoffs. You're going to look at the coach the same way the last 2 months. You make the Stanley Cup final, and people look at the coach and say, great job. Was it his fault that they were playing the way they were in the regular season? Probably not. Was it all him that they made the run in the playoffs? Probably not. It's somewhere in the middle. But that's what we always look at. I do think a big part of it, Hoch, and honestly, it's a concern going forward. A lot of this all season long and in the playoffs was predicated on the goaltending. Early in the year, you could have had Toe Blake behind the bench. I'm telling you, Hoch, the Panthers' goaltending was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, mainly, they had big chunks of games where they were good, and they still lost. They lost to Philadelphia. They lost to Chicago. They lost to Columbus. Those were goaltending losses. Those weren't style of play, goal-scoring losses. And then, Spencer Knight got hot a little bit there in November, December. Then Bob came in and played okay. And then twice Bob had to go out, and Alex Lyon came in. And the first time he held down the fort. The second time he got him to the playoffs. And then obviously, once Bob got in there, and they won the Game 7 in Boston, he carried you through 2 series. I mean, Bobrovsky was unbeatable against both Toronto and Carolina. He was in their heads. They just could not score on him. And then, unfortunately, his level, like the team, dropped in the Stanley Cup final, and you're out in 5. So I do think, we look at all the different things, style, this and that. Hey, man, when you get the saves, like there were times in that Carolina series, as you know, the Hurricanes were in the Panthers' zone 5-6 minutes at a time, just peppering with shots, and Bobrovsky was stopping everything. So I do think the goaltending probably had more to do with the success or lack of success over the last 9 months with this team, then probably style of play and heart and character and coaching. That's my opinion on it.
Goldie, maybe you just answered it there with the discussion about goaltending. But if you had to pick one player as the MVP, I know it's tough, but as the MVP of that postseason run, is it Bobrovsky? I mean, Tkachuk. You could probably argue Verhaeghe as well. Who would you pick?
Arger.
It would clearly be for me between Bobrovsky and Tkachuk, with Barkov probably an underappreciated third on that list, along with Montour. But Barkov, I know he didn't score enough for a lot of people, but he played really well. He shut down those guys at 5-on-5 for the most part, those big centers on the other teams. But you got to go with the goaltender. I mean, what Bobrovsky did, and look, I know he wasn't very good when he first came in the Boston series. He wasn't bad, but they lost game 4. They find a way to win game 5. Remember, they had 3 leads. Everybody forgets how you got there. They had 3 leads in game 5, 1-0, 2-1, and 3-2. And Boston came back each time before Tkachuk won it in overtime. They gave up a ton of goals in game 6. What was that? Was it 7-5 Panthers in that game or something? And then in game 7, remember, they lost the lead in the third. They were down with a minute left. So, but after that, from game 1 in Carolina all the way through, Bobrovsky was just incredible. He did a great job at home in game 3, a good job at home in game 4, in the Cup final to get 1 win and keep them close. So, yeah, I go with Sergei Bobrovsky. Solana, it's the best I've seen him play as a Panther, and hopefully he can bottle some of that up and, next season have a few stretches during the regular season where he plays the way he has the last, 6-7 weeks.
Obviously, we know goaltending can be very streaky, but you get in a zone, and we may have seen it with Aiden Hill, right? Because you get in a zone, and it just seems like anything that's coming their way, they can stop. Ultimately, do you think the long layoff before the VGK series started is what did Sergei Bobrovsky in?
You might be right, Hawk. Look, I thought after the Carolina series, it was great for him because remember or after the Toronto series, I should say, they went right from Boston to Toronto, literally 48 hours later. And he was great early on, remember, in those games and held the fort down and they got those wins. And I thought after the Toronto series, wow, this is great. Bob gets a week off. Then he goes into Carolina and plays great. So I didn't have a big concern because I thought the time off for him would probably offset that in the zone thing that you're talking about, which is true. Goalies do get in that zone. But maybe you're right. Maybe it was a little bit too long because certainly in this series, at times he was very good. I'm not sure they win the series if he plays, close to the way he played the last 2 series. But at some key moments, he gave up some goals. That normally goalies give up, whereas the 2 previous series, he gave up nothing. So it's a great question. We will never know the answer to it, unfortunately, if they only had 5 days off or 6 days off, did it take him out of the zone? It's a great question. One thing I will say is if it did, Huck, it was probably offset by how beat up they were that They got that much time off. Because remember, they had a great chance to win game 1. I mean, it was a pretty even game. They won game 3. And they had a really good chance to win game 4 despite being outplayed. They nearly got that game tied late in the game. So, 2 of the games, obviously, they got hammered, blown out in Vegas. But those other 3 games, they only won 1 of them, but they were there for the taking.
Can you extrapolate? Because you saw us there, game 3. Can you extrapolate the fact that the only Stanley Cup final game that Hochman and Solana have ever attended is the only victory in Panthers Stanley Cup history? Could we make some sort of extrapolation there?
Clearly, where the hell were you for game 4? You're the reason. Forget Bobrovsky and everything. You're the reason we lost. Come on, man. We'd have a Stanley Cup parade next week if it wasn't for you guys. You guys blew it. You blew the Heat series too, the 2 of you.
Goldie, do you think there's any regrets from the Panthers? And I know this is silly, but any regrets that they touched the Prince of Wales trophy?
I don't think so. It goes both ways. Tampa always touched it. They won the 2 cups. When you don't win, you can look at everything, right? Should you had 6 days off? Should Hochman have been at the game? Should you have not touched the trophy? I mean, maybe, you know what? It'll be interesting. Hopefully they win it next year and we find out. Maybe they'll change that up. But I don't know if you guys everybody heard all the stories. Maybe not because people are busy now in their cars and working. But what Matthew Tkachuk went through, unlike you guys who weren't there at game 4, for Matthew Tkachuk to line up and play game 4 the dude literally couldn't get out of bed that day. His brother had to get him out of bed. Teammates were literally dressing him in the locker room, tying his skates to get him out onto the ice. The guy gave 16 minutes. He nearly scored at the end of the game to get it tied. I mean, remember, NHL players, number one, don't get paid in the playoffs. Number two, the guy's already got 8 years and $9.5 million locked up. Number three, he already had a great year and was 1A, 1B, and the reason they were there. Easily could have said, literally, I have a broken sternum, which means you have a broken body, and I can't get out there tonight. And Matthew Tkachuk played in that game. It tells you all you need to know about what that guy is all about.
I said that yesterday. I said, there's not a single person who wouldn't have understood if they said this guy's got a broken sternum, he can't go. No one would have said, oh, you got to tough it out or questioned his commitment. That dude, for the love of Florida and Sunrise and his teammates and Paul Maurice and just the love of the game, tried to play through something. When we learned that he had a broken sternum, Dr. Chuck texted me and said he literally puts people in the hospital with that because the pain is so intense. You have to put people on pain meds. You have to monitor them in the hospital. The fact that he was out there on the ice at all with a broken sternum should tell you anything you need to know about him.
It's great. It really is. And you know what I look at it, Hoch? First of all, one thing on the runs of both teams and the fact that we were watching games every other night and they were both 8 seeds and they were both, started on the road. So when they came home, we had games 3 and 4, the Cup final and the NBA finals every other night. Just incredible. I think we really grew up as a sports market during this run. We brought a lot of people to the table that don't necessarily, not really sports fans, don't know, who Max Strus or Anton Lundell are, but they were part of it. And that's what the big sports cities do. In New York, not everybody's a big, Yankee fan, but when they make the World Series, everybody's on board, everybody's out watching it. Same thing with teams like the Red Sox and the Patriots, and you can go on and on. In Chicago, as you know well, Hoch, not everybody knows who the 8-hitter is on the Cubs, but if you make the playoffs, everybody's a Cubs fan that day. So I really think we grew up as a sports market, and I thought it was great. And the other thing is I think the Panthers, because of what you just talked about, have taken a major step in that maybe overused word in sports, but it's true, the culture. I think they took a step towards the Heat. And now there is a Panther culture. It's, you do what Paul Maurice, say, hey, 85% of the game is played within 3 feet of the boards, and the heart and the character and play through everything and never give up and never give in. I think they've now got that established. I thought the last 2 months were really huge for our, for South Florida in sports, beyond just what went on the court and on the ice.
Totally agree with you. I do believe that they started to develop that culture. I thought that there were a lot of similarities between the Heat and what we've learned now about the Panthers and what they went through during this postseason run. So, yeah, I hope it is the start of something great because I have to tell you, it was, like you said, kind of a rocky regular season. Nobody expected anything, but man, and for both teams, Heat and Panthers, man, that postseason, I mean, you've been doing sports down here a long time as I have. I cannot recall a postseason that was that much fun. It was every bleeping night, and I'm thankful to both teams for it.
It was, the fact they were both underdogs the way they were. I think that's just, you will never see it again. I mean, first of all, for 2 teams to make the playoffs in the same market as the number 8 seed, that's rare in and of itself. And then once you get in as the 8 seed, teams never make it to the championship round. So when we say it's once in a lifetime, what we just saw for the last, 60 days, 61 days, really was once in a lifetime. And I did enjoy, Hoch, how both teams the Heat had a chance to win Game 5, and Jimmy Butler, they could say nothing's wrong with him. Obviously, something was wrong with him. He scores those, 11, 13 points in the fourth quarter, puts him in a position to win. Tkachuk comes back trying to tie Game 4 and all the injuries the Panthers had. Both teams went down swinging, and we can appreciate that.
Yeah, no doubt. Goldie, one more question. What number will Dalvin Cook wear for the Dolphins?
Well, that is a great question. There's no longer running back numbers, so I have no idea if he gets here what number he wears. I'm just trying to learn the guys that are on the team, Hoch. Did you know Malik Reed's number 47? I bet you didn't know that.
I did not know that. What number is Mike White?
Mike White is number 14.
14. All right. I got to get the
I
quarterback.
need to know that one. He's going to play most of the games in the preseason probably, so I need to know that one.
Yeah, no doubt. Steve Goldstein, you'll watch him on the Dolphins preseason games on CBS 4, and what a season he just gave us on Bally Sports Florida. Thank you, Goldie. Crowder
really
sends his
appreciate
best,
the
by
kind
the way.
words, Huck.
Crowder says I'm not going to tell you the company that he's bitching at. He says, they said they have to call me back. Should I come to the studio? Should I call in? This is terrible.
I got 2 words for you, Crowder. Best Buy. Go get a damn computer. See ya.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Step it up, pivot guy. Got all the pivot money in the world. All right, there you go. Steve Goldstein talking a little Panthers, little Heat, little Dolphins.